Welcome, pleased you're here. Today we're going to be looking at what VCs are really looking for. And surprise, it's not your deck. The one question that VCs are thinking through in their head we're going to look at, and how do we pitch VCs, especially at the seed stage, so that they can say yes. Now, who this presentation is for is first-time tech founders, SaaS, AI, but tech founders at the pre-seed and seed stage. So if that's you, you're in the right place. My approach is pretty simple in all these presentations. I think founders are the most advised people on the planet. Certainly I was. I'm not here to give you direct advice. I'm just going to share my experience. And what I always like to think about when people are giving advice, or just in general, is like, why is someone qualified in their experience or advice that I'd want to listen to them? And so just briefly, my background, I've been a software engineer, like that's my background. I've founded 3 venture-backed companies in Australia, 2 in Silicon Valley. I've had 2 of them acquired, amazing. I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, San Francisco. I've been a pre-seed investor in more than 50 startups. I think I had 58 deals, and 4 of them caught on to be unicorns. Hooray, so rewarding. I've sat as a corporate VC at a US megatech, and I've sat in thousands of meetings with VCs and with founders on both sides of the table. So I'm sharing my experience in all the things I've learned here. Now, from a founder lens, and I'm going to be talking today from a founder lens, my job in working with VCs, in pitching VCs, and trying to raise money is not to explain my company. It's not to make sure that they fully understand the ins and outs of my technology, the product, etc. My job is really to help them answer one question in their inner world that they're going to have to explain to their fund is, could my company that I'm pitching them be one of the small few companies that returns the fund for them? Right? So everything in my pitch, everything in my narrative, everything in my conversations goes towards, does this help the VC answer this question in their own head? So I didn't know this when I first started raising, right? But you're a VC, you've started a fund, and you've got some limited partners, i.e. the people who've invested in you. And your job is to return, ideally 3 times plus the amount of funds that you've raised from them. So if I've raised $100 million, I need to return $300 million. If I've raised $1 billion, I need to return $3 billion. And VCs measure this in a metric called TVPI, the total value to paid in, which is like, what is my fund worth against how much money have I taken from my LPs, right? And the thing is, most VCs don't hit this. They don't hit their 3x and beyond. And for first-time funds, if they don't hit this, they don't exist. They don't get another round. Right? So the question behind this question, right, when they're hearing my pitch is there a believable path where this guy's company could be one of those outcomes? Right? So, if the answer in their mind is, look, this is a solid $30 to $50 million revenue business, or $30 to $50 million valuation business, or can be acquired for $30 to $50 million, they might like you, but they're going to pass. Right? The venture model requires outliers, especially at the pre-seed and seed stage. I didn't know that. Right? This was news to me. So when I'm talking with a VC, I'll be often, like, the VC's thinking a little about the market. Right? So is this market large enough that if this startup executes well, they could create a really big outsized outcome for me? Right? And also, if the market's big enough, we can probably make a few mistakes and the outcome can still be a great return for us. Right? So that's what I'm thinking about on the venture side is, okay, if these guys execute really well over a 7 to 10 year period, how big can this get? Also, if these guys execute poorly, is the market buoyant enough, fast enough, moving, big enough to still support a really meaningful outcome? So if as a founder I'm communicating with a VC and they say, hey, talk to me about your market, and I'm saying, oh, look, we can get 1% of this $10 billion market, that signals to the VC really weak thinking about your distribution, about your total addressable market. VCs have heard this 1,000 times, right? So what looks way better? Like, when I'm talking with a VC, I start with my wedge, right? Like, who is the first customer who's going to pay me? Like, what's their job title? What type of company are they in? Are they financial controllers at mid-market manufacturing firms in North America? And there's 183,000 of them, right? Cool. They're the people who have some kind of acute pain, and that's okay that that's a small market. Once I've conquered that first wedge, I've got a winnable first chapter. Here's how we're going to expand out. Right? Here's some adjacents beyond this, different markets, different use cases, etc. Right? So, and over time, I can address more and more of this very large market. Right? So I need both those things, a very tight wedge, which is clearly understood, and a very big market. Now, as a venture guy, I'm betting, especially at the pre-seed and seed stage, more on people than any traction, right? So, there's so little data. I'm relying on pattern recognition as a VC and my conviction in the team as the people. Right? And so one of the things that I'm looking for is founder market fit. Why is this your life's work? Why are you uniquely qualified to solve this problem in ways that other people aren't? How fast are you learning? Can I see, and does your execution show that you're moving very rapidly? And is there some evidence that you've finished hard things in the past? I'm looking for and thinking about, like, why this problem? Is there some clear narrative that you've lived this pain and that you have an unfair insight, right? And that's way more valuable than, oh, hey, cool, you're a Stanford MBA. Hey, you left McKinsey and you've done strategy. It's like you've experienced the pain, you understand it better than other people for some unique reason, and you've got this insight that's different to how other people think, right? Like, that's really, really valuable, right? So our job as a founder is to communicate this early. And in the eyes of the VC, this founder's like, okay, if this is going to be an outsized return, this has seemingly happened in the past when founders like this have shown up. This is a founder like this. You have deep founder market fit, right? And why now, right? Like, what about has happened for you or the market that there's some inflection point, some shift that this problem has now changed, or the environment has changed, that this problem is now way more burning? That may be technological, it may be social, it may be regulatory, a handful of reasons why, right? So it's less about your resume, like, oh, cool, you worked at big tech, like, don't care. It's, why do you have founder market fit? How fast are you learning? Some proof you've done hard things, and that I've got an unfair insight based on my lived pain that's very timely. So that's the first thing that I want to be communicating with a VC as a founder. Like, the first things first. That's the first thing, not the product, not the solution, not the market. Like, get them to understand me and why I've got something that's unique. We often hear about traction, right? So as a VC, I'm thinking about traction. Cool. Like, oh, tell me about your traction. If you're a founder, you've probably heard this, right? But it's not about revenue size. It's not about the total number, all right? It's about the signal quality. So, I've had founders come to me and say, oh, I said, well, where are you up to on growth, or how's your traction looking? And they'd say, we've got $1 million in revenue. Like, that tells me nothing. The first thing I think of is, oh, you've got one enterprise client that you signed 2 years ago. So what as a founder, what I want to communicate well to venture folks is that there's a accelerating growth rate. I've got consistency of that growth, whether that's across sales cycles or acquisition if it's B2C. And some way that I can demonstrate that customers want this more than I want them. Right? So, if that's accelerating sales cycles, great. If that's signed up to paid pilots before we've built the thing, if that's wait lists, whatever it happens to be. Right? So I'm encouraging you as a founder, what I think about is less about a snapshot and more about momentum. So saying, hey, we've got 50,000 MRR, like, that's not traction to me, right? If they said, oh, we're doing 23% month on month for the last 6 months and we've got less than 10% churn, like, whoa, okay, something's working here and it's accelerating. That's cool, right? It's not the size of the numbers, it's the velocity. So I always think about velocity when I'm quantifying my traction. I also really like to communicate with VCs, like, why the problem that I'm solving fits somewhere nicely in a budget line, right? So, we see lots of problems being solved on the VC side. Like you might have heard, like, is it a vitamin or is it a painkiller, right? But vitamins cool, but I forget to take them, right? If I'm in pain, I'm not forgetting my painkillers. So for the problem I'm solving, is there money already allocated towards this? Is some aspect of this problem mission critical for the user? Like in B2B, is it tied to revenue, risk, or survival? If it's for a consumer, is it tied to some other form of instinct that is incredibly important to them? Relationships, income, status, like some base need that humans have. And, can this be solved without a ton of persuasion? Because the problem is painful enough that people are willing to take a bet on trying to solve it, right? So the test that I'm running in my head, and I think as founders, we want to communicate this, like, if our solution disappears tomorrow, here is a group of people who are incredibly annoyed about this, and here's why, right? So as a founder, when I'm pitching, I really want to quantify the pain. Like, okay, we're solving this problem for these users, and right now the current problem for them costs them this much and this much time, and they're exposed in this risk way. So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say super niche. Pharmaceutical marketing content managers spend $100,000 and 3 months per product launch per month. Right now, it costs them 100 hours and they've got 42 rounds of revision, and 20% of them end up in product recalls. Some deep understanding of this problem, right? So, okay, this is painful. Our solution is 10 times better because the price goes from $100,000 to $5,000. The iteration time goes from 43 iterations to 2, and we reduce risk by 43% because when our customers use this, we've seen these results, right? It's produced this much more, resulting in a 300% greater revenue outcome for them. Okay, I've talked very little about the product there. I've just deeply quantified the pain of the user in multiple different dimensions and the impact of the solution in multiple dimensions, right? Now, this buyer, he would be very annoyed if this went away because he doesn't want to go back to his old way of living. Like, there's pain, right? So when I'm explaining to the VC, I want to be very clear early on that the buyer isn't just slightly annoyed, that this is very painful for them. You may have been asked about differentiation, right? How are you different? What's the competitive landscape? Those kinds of things, right? So for me, I always think about differentiation in terms of insight, not features. Like on the VC side, I assume features can be copied. But if I've got a contrarian approach to solving the problem, or I have a deep insight that's contrarian, then incumbents can't or won't respond because of the structural deficiencies in doing so. They can't adapt. Like, I'm disruptive, right? So if, how are you different than your competitors? Oh, we're better, we're cheaper, we're faster, cool. A way better response is, well, everyone assumes X, but that's wrong because of this. That's why we work. So, outsized outcomes for venture folks usually come from a differentiated insight or wedge, not from doing the same thing better, cheaper, faster. Like, I don't care about 10% faster. I don't care about 10% cheaper. It needs to be 10x, 100x better, and that usually comes from a contrarian insight about the problem or the solution or the market. When I'm raising, and a VC's, when a VC's looking at how much I'm raising, it's telling them how I'm thinking about this, right? So, seed money is for really nailing my product market fit, like proving, does the market want this? Is there some kind of repeatability in customer acquisition and customer retention? And really just de-risking the model. Like, my seed round money is to reduce as much concept risk as possible from the business. It's not so that I can stack working capital for growth on later, right? If I'm over raising and I communicate, hey, we're raising $20 or $50 million, I've seen a seed founder recently who was trying to raise a $100 million seed. It signals fantasy and a lack of understanding of the valuation growth through multiple rounds, but also under raising signals naivety. Like, if I'm raising 300, 500, 750K, as venture folks, we know that you're not going to get everything right on the first shot on goal. Like, it's going to take multiple attempts. So framing the raise so that I'm raising a chunky enough amount of money to give me 18 to 24 months with the application of funds being nailing and crushing the key conceptual risks of my business. It's more about that than scale, especially at the pre-seed and seed stage. What I didn't know as a founder, I thought I had to be right all the time and that I had to know everything about my business and be completely correct on it, right? But coachability is really important for venture folks. Like on the venture side now, if a founder's not willing to take on feedback or different ways of thinking, I'm fearful of their survivability, right? If a founder's their mission is they've had an idea and a vision and they've made a plan and their job is to prove everyone else right in executing it, it's not going to be a great outcome. Or I don't see this being large outcomes often. Right? They expect me to be correctable, and I want to be able to share that in my engagement with VCs early on. So, as a VC, I'm massively watching for how do I respond to how does the founder respond to pushback? If a founder gets defensive, it materially decreases my risk, my desire to work with this founder. Because I think, hey, these guys probably won't survive. They're not going to adapt. So let's say I see a founder, they're talking and I say, oh, look, I'd be curious, how are you're thinking about go-to-market? Tell me about that. I'll say a couple of things. I'm like, oh, interesting. My take is that this isn't that effective, or, it seems like you're weak in this area of your business. If they dive into, oh, well, no, we're not for all these reasons, that's a bad look, right? So as a founder, you want to signal this. So, hey, love to know where you think we should be focusing. If you get feedback, oh, look, tell me about your competitive differentiation. Well, everyone thinks X, but we know Y to be true, and we've differentiated in this ways. How would you think about differentiation? Listen, hey, that's really useful. We hadn't thought of that. If founders are deflecting and getting defensive, it's a common trait I see, and I made this mistake myself, a lot. I felt like I had to be right about everything. I don't. I need to be coachable. Right. So another thing that I didn't know is that the purpose of competitive tension really just changes how I see risk, right? If I'm the only VC talking to you, then I'm kind of nervous, right? Because I haven't had other VCs' eyes over this. So when I'm sitting on a venture side and I'm allocating the funds of my limited partners, I kind of need to be able to justify why I've made these bets. And one really cool way is to have other venture funds be interested or other venture funds participate in the round, right? So as a founder, it's completely normal and reasonable to be talking with multiple VCs at the same time. It's okay to talk about that and be honest, right? And give clear timelines. And once I've got some interest from one VC, and we can talk about what that looks like, I can say to other VCs, hey, we're in early conversations with these other funds. And what will happen is the VC I'm talking to will likely know someone at the fund and shoot them a WhatsApp note and say, hey, you're talking with these folks. And we can't lie about this. Obviously, we'll get caught. But hey, yeah, we're in early conversations with them. I really like the differentiated thinking. Still not quite sure about go-to-market or team strength. What are you guys thinking? All right. So, it's really powerful when VCs start talking between each other, and it creates urgency between them. But what kills trust is name dropping, or just overplaying your hand. Look, we're already oversubscribed with 4 tier ones. All right, cool. Good luck, buddy. But just being authentic about where you're at in the process with other VCs is incredibly potent, and that competitive tension changes how I see the risk of making an investment in you. Right? So I want to be truthful, state it cleanly. It creates pressure, but if I lie, it just burns my reputation. Common mistakes I made as a founder, and I see in other founders, which is when I'm meeting with VCs, I'm leading with my product. Because I'm a product guy and software engineer, I'm so excited to tell you all about my product and jump into a product demo. On the venture side, I don't want to see your product demo in meeting 1, maybe not even in meeting 2. I want to get to know you. I want to get to know the problem, right? I want to understand where you came from and how you discovered this problem, and how much you know about this problem. How deeply do you understand the problem? That's the bulk of what I want to talk about. I don't care that your RAG AI has been trained using, X competitively unavailable data sets. I don't care about your workflows. I don't care about your technology, right? Not in meeting 1, 2. Later we'll dive into that, right? But as a founder, I really want to show you my demo and my deck. but VCs, we don't want to see it. We want to talk with you about your origin story. As a founder, I made this mistake repeatedly, and I see other founders do it now, sitting on the venture side, is we'll talk about how we're solving things, right? Not why. Not why did we come to this decision? Why have we built this way? What did we learn that drove us to create a solution for, this part of the solution because it addresses this problem? Not just like, hey, it does this, it does this, it does this. Cool. Like, I can do anything with an agent now. Like, tell me something that I don't understand. Right? Why do you know this? Right? Also, avoiding competition. Like, I think it's really important to talk about competition. I would often just say, oh yeah, we've got some competition, but our feature A, B, and C are better than theirs, right? Most founders and most early stage startups, their competition is often not other products. It might be doing nothing, or hand rolling a solution, or they're solving it in Excel, or they're solving it with an AI agent. Like, it's not just the competition in terms of other funded technology companies, but what processes are they currently using to get that job done? And how do I understand those things? And how do I understand how mine is 10 times more useful based on my unique insight? I often also hear founders often being quite vague. We have a massive opportunity for this huge market and the product has differentiated X, and I'm like, you're not telling me what the actual substance is, right? So it's important to be really clear, even if it's small. That's totally okay. I prefer precision, and which shows clarity of understanding, right? Because I can always assume if it's a big enough market, we'll have places to go. And a founder often, like I made this mistake, is just overestimating how much context a VC is going to give me about how they're thinking about what's going on, right? So, the purpose of today's thing is to bring you a bit into the VC's shoes so you've got the context of what they're listening for and how and why. So we can just give them the information that they need, not what I want to tell them. Great. So if you got this far, your homework today is, before your next investor meeting, just rewrite your company. Rewrite your little blurb, right? Through an investor's lens. Right? Like, not what your product does, but your founder market fit. Your who specifically has your problem and quantified pain around it. You get really clear on these things, like about your wedge and the insight that makes people lean forward, right? So number one, you rewrite your company. Get a one sentence. You may break out bullets if you want. Number two is identify one reason that this could be a fund returning outcome for them, right? And make sure that I can communicate that clearly. And then three, name my top 3 risks, and so I can communicate that. Like, that's really healthy. That's why I'm raising is to de-risk the business. And if a VC will see my risks. They've got a set. They know what these are. They've seen. We see hundreds, thousands of companies. I immediately spot your risks. If you tell me you know that they're there, and what you're doing or why, as part of raising this money, that will address it. Like, cool. That builds a ton of credibility. So that's your homework. So go write these things out. Take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes. It'll massively improve how you engage with VCs. So today we covered, the one question that VCs are really thinking through is like, can this be an outlier return for my fund? Think about, yes, the market is the ceiling, but what's my wedge? How am I expanding? What's adjacent to this? Team before proof. So ensuring that I'm communicating my founder market fit, founder problem alignment. Traction as a direction piece, like I want velocity, not snapshots. Is my problem a budget line item somewhere, and how am I communicating that? It's a pain that already has money. What insight do I have that's contrarian, not just why my features are better? What's my ask? Is it reasonably understanding that I'm going to need some fuel to solve this problem to get to the next stage? Am I coachable? Am I listening and giving feedback and avoiding defensibility? Getting curious. Like, curiosity is the winner here, right? And why competitive tension is useful. It doesn't work. It's not a bad thing. And VCs like it too. All right. So hope that was useful. Look, if you want, this is just a few things that I've learned. Like, you've got a lens on capital raising. If you want the full insights, the full learnings, like what VCs to target, there's 18,000 VCs globally. How do I find just the right ones for me? What am I supposed to say in my emails, in my meetings, so that VCs reply and that the meetings go well? How do I decode feedback on what venture folks are saying to me? If they say come back with more traction, what does that actually? There's two ways that you can get some more information. Number one, I run a weekly webinar. It's totally free, and it's called How to Raise Your Seed Round in 90 Days Without Warm Intros. Right, so there's a link below in the thing. Come along. It's live. I'll be there. A bunch of other founders. Half of it's content, half of it's Q&A. We can dive into your fundraise, and it's super interesting. I get a ton of, it's super rewarding for me to do, right? And option two is I do run Raise Academy and an insider squad, right? Which is a small cohort groups of first-time tech founders raising seed, right? And if you do this, on day one, you've got your perfect VC list out of the 18,000 globally to the 75. We've got a research method that just gives you exactly who you need to talk to, right? By the end of week one, we've revamped all your investor outreach comms so that VCs will reply to your emails and you have great conversations based on all the things we've talked about today. And the full raise method, how do I create competitive tension? How do I negotiate term sheets? How do I get through due diligence? All the things you need to know to raise a seed round in 90 days, right? And there's a bunch of cool bonus tools like an AI researcher for VCs, an AI email teaser, an AI pitch deck rewriter, all AI tools for everything that you can imagine. So I put a link for that too in the description. It is paid, but it's well worth it. Some founders who do this think it's the best money they've ever spent. But look, whatever fits for you, I'm rooting for you either way. Please join me today. Best of luck.